Good morning, everybody. This is Omar Serrato with the Tilted Lawyer Podcast. And I am pumped for this morning's show. We're going to be getting back to our roots a little bit. If you've been following my channel for the last year, there was a month last year in January where I covered the Natalia Grace Barnett story. It is the most heartbreaking, harrowing, gut-wrenching story that I've covered, I think probably in 2024, just for all of the bad luck bestowed upon this little girl. There's been ruminations that her story was similar to the horror flick that came out, I think it was like in 2009, 2008, The Orphan, where her adopted family attempted to have her re-aged from child age, like 5 or 6 years old, to actually she's an adult, 18 years old. Re-establish her birth date from 2003 to 1988. And they did that on the strength of this movie, The Orphanage. They just got this idea. It wasn't working out the way that they'd hoped. They had these big dreams and hopes of being viewed as this savior adoptive couple that was taking her in, and they already had a son that was exceptionally gifted educationally, and they were hoping that she was going to follow in the same vein. And when it became readily apparent that that wasn't the thing, they attempted to re-age her. They ended up getting her and leaving her and abandoning her in an apartment. We're going to go over the entire rehash. At any rate, we covered all of that. And the way to follow this coverage is to go back and watch those videos from the first episode that I covered on Natalia Grace all the way to get caught up. There is a corresponding documentary. It's on HBO Max called The Curious Case of Natalia Grace Barnett. I am covering today season 3, where we learned some uncomfortable truths about the Manns family that was hailed in season 2 as a heroic saving grace for Natalia, insofar as they get all the way to the end of season 2 and they go through this adoptive process and it's all hugs and smiles, and then they end season 2 with this. They end season 2 with this phone call from Antoine Manns, the self-proclaimed Bishop Manns. Bishop Antoine. And his phone call, he proceeds to say, hey, Natalia's tweaking. She doesn't care about anything about herself. She's done a lot of things. Cynthia Manns is on the phone with her, and they just leave it at that. What was supposed to be the end, a very heartwarming story, a happy ending for Natalia, they leave this cliffhanger. So what in the F was that all about? And, well, season 3 gets into that, and we're going to cover all of it coming up right now. Let's get started.
Whatever you might be going through and wherever you might be, this is Omar Serrato with the Tilted Lawyer Podcast. I'm here to take your mind off of things. Yes, I'm an attorney. No, I'm not giving you legal advice. We're going to sit and talk like people, as these are the candid thoughts of one practicing attorney, and it's after hours. So have a seat. Feel free to have a drink and join me. Let's get started.
All right, so here we go. The Barnett case. If you guys needed a refresher, let's go over where we're at. So Natalia was born in the Ukraine. They found her mom, her biological mother. It was this gut-wrenching story about how she was forced to give her up. They have birth records of her in the Ukraine. They didn't correspond with what happened in the United States. Her exact birth date is still unclear, but the most consistent information puts her birth year around 2003, which, as the date of the filming of today's show, would put her around 21, 22 years old, and she presents as a 21 or 22 year old. And if there was any question before, I think as the coverage of this story has unfolded, and I remember hearing about this story about Natalia when I was in law school. I mean, back in 2011, 2012. But when they were covering it back then, they were covering it as if it was this real life story of the orphan, where this Ukrainian orphan frauds the system, presents herself as a 6-year-old to get adopted by an American family, only to find out that she's actually biologically 22 years old. That's the way they were framing it back when I was in law school. And back then, I didn't really have time to read up. It was just an interesting story. Like, oh, look at that. It happens in real life. Come to find out that was not. That was not nearly the end of the story. There was a lot behind the scenes. But going back to Natalia's early life, she lived in a Ukrainian orphanage where she had experienced waves of trauma, including a disturbing encounter with a masked figure who would come as she was trying to hide. And keep in mind her disability, she couldn't really move around the best. But he walks in there, he's got this scary mask on. It was, I guess, one of the methods that they used to scare the children into bed. And whenever he would come into the room, everybody would scatter about into their beds, but she couldn't because she couldn't move. And so she sat there in terror behind this couch as this masked figure peers over her and causes unimaginable traumas, I'm sure. There was allegations of sexual trauma that she had experienced at the hands of another individual that was unidentified in the series, but was an older gentleman that they uncovered a photograph of, who is said and alleged to have sexually assaulted Natalia when she was there living at the orphanage. She was adopted by 2 different families out of state before ultimately being adopted by the Barnetts. The reasons for those prior placements have never really fully been resolved. But fast forward to 2010, in or around May 24th, Natalia becomes a patient of a gentleman named Dr. McLaren. And if you remember Dr. McLaren, he was the family doctor of the Barnetts. He sees Natalia and proceeds to write medical documents that would lead one to believe that she had adult traits, physical adult traits that could not be explained. Natalia was ultimately adopted by Michael and Christine Barnett. She initially had a positive experience until it turned very sour very quickly. Her adoptive mother, Christine Barnett, along with Michael, and we've talked about a year ago when we covered this case, all of the horrors that Natalia had to undergo at the hands of her primary biological parents. And I shouldn't say primary, they were like the second family. The DePauls tried to get involved in the adoption process. It didn't work out. And the DePauls are heavily featured in season 3, and the story kind of revolves around them. And we'll talk about that. Also in 2010, while this other Dr. McLaren is trying to classify her as, I can't explain it, she's got these adult traits. She must be an adult. Her birth date must be like 1988. This dentist, Dr. Tim Gosweiler, for the first time that we had ever seen, other than in court transcripts and otherwise, notes that there was the presence of both baby teeth and adult teeth, which indicate that she had an age range of about 6 to 9 years old, which would have been consistent with the birth date of 2003. And many of you had written to me, like, oh, well, I'm an adult and I have baby teeth. And so that wasn't really dispositive. It was just it was a little peccadillo that needed to be resolved in courts when they were trying to decide what legal age they were going to attribute to Natalia. The judge relies on heavily the reports of Dr. McLaren. He sees some of the reports from the dentist and other evidence, and there were people that were trying to attribute her the correct age of 2003, and he relies on this very unscientific method of aging her, where he essentially says that, well, she must be 18 because of this and that. I forget the specific reason, but it had nothing to do with medical opinion. It was just his own logic. It was literally like watching the Monty Python. What's that movie called, Dominic? Monty Python, The Search for the Holy Grail, where they're trying to logically figure out whether or not this lady was a witch. And they come up with all of these ridiculous logical tests that would prove or disprove whether or not she was a witch. That's basically the kind of logic that he used. Some of you will get the reference, others won't, and it's fine. As a result of her being legally re-aged, she goes from a minor to an adult overnight. And because she no longer has the protections of a minor child, she's no longer a minor child. She now has guardians who are taking care of her because of her disability. And that becomes very expensive for the Barnetts. So they get her this apartment and they try to put her up and they basically abandon her there. So she's this 8-9-year-old little girl trying to live on her own. And we detailed all of those things in previous episodes. In the course of all of that, I'm going to fast forward a little bit to 2013 to about 2022, where season 2 concludes. Natalia is seen to have been rescued by the man's family, Cynthia and Antoine. At that time, Cynthia and Antoine had both appeared on the Dr. Phil show with Natalia to discuss how she had progressed and how they found her and how it was this big success story and everybody was, applauding their efforts and all of that. They attempt to legally adopt her, and they do. They become her guardians for more than a decade. They're providing care, but more importantly, they become the payees for her Social Security benefits. So Natalia was collecting about $800 a month from Social Security on account of her disabilities, various disabilities, and there are multiple. That money was going straight to the man's family, who it turns out had not just adopted Natalia. They had a whole litter of adopted children whom they were also collecting benefits from. And by some estimates, it's estimated that the government assistance on account of them taking in all of those children would have been in excess of 6 figures, which is fine. I mean, if you're going to do that, there's people that do it as a career and they're good at it. There's some that do it as a career for the money because they don't really actually want to work and they're terrible at it. Well, in season 3, they alleged various individuals, the neighbors of the Manns, of Antoine and Cynthia, that they were not the best parents, and we're going to get into all of those reasons why. So in 2022, and again in season 2, they identify Cynthia and Antoine as the saviors of Natalia. The Manns join a church where Tamara Lee and Bishop Stephen Thomas Lee attend. Antoine Manns refers to himself as a bishop. He starts his own church to become, I guess, the head honcho church leader over there at his church. So in other words, he has not been, and became very clear in season 3 that he was not officially ordained by any other religious person to have attained the title of bishop. And I don't even know what would go into that, but where others would have ordained him, that was not the case. He ordained himself. He declared himself a bishop. He might as well have said he's the Pope. Why not? I mean, since we're going for it, bishop, cardinal, pope, saint, I don't know, but he self-proclaimed himself Bishop Manns, and that's how he sees himself. That's how he wants to be addressed. Around this time, it's revealed in season 3 that Natalia starts to begin to see signs that the Manns are a little controlling. She is not free. The Manns had legal authority to institutionalize her at any time, for example, because she was a dependent. Natalia's money was used to pay for a house for the Manns family and a trailer that they had. She was not on the deed. All of the money that she got from the Dr. Phil show, and I think it was something in excess of $300,000, well, they took that money from her. They took that money from her and they used it to purchase specific different other properties. Not only that, but as the payees for her Social Security, they were cashing the checks. And as we're going to come to find out, Natalia Grace still had to pay taxes on that. Why the taxes weren't taken out before they received the checks, I don't know the answer to that question. But in season 3, They make this big deal about how Natalya has this big tax bill, and the Mans were the ones that collected all the money, and they weren't going to offer to help her pay for any of it, which is wild, but that's where we ended up. So let's just recap how they begin season 1. So we open up episode 1, season 3. They left us on this cliffhanger. And right off the bat, I got to say, man, I got to say, the production quality of the documentary made it feel a lot like 90s style talk show television, Jerry Springer with the dramatic pauses and the dramatic musics and the jump cuts and all these things. It just made it a cartoon out of this entire situation, a complete and utter spectacle. And it was very difficult to take the show serious because they started off, it's almost like they're playing instigator. Like you got the producer in there, he's talking to the Mans, he's talking to the DePauls. And if you are not familiar, the DePauls had originally tried to adopt Natalya before she wound up with the Barnetts. It didn't go through for a number of different reasons. Some suspect that CPS was called by her previous adopted family. It's a whole another situation that I'm not going to get into today. But they open up episode 1, and they're focusing on the unfolding conflict between Natalya and her adoptive parents. It always struck me as odd because in season 2, Antoine he presents as this religious, authoritative person. He comes out swinging at Michael Barnett, and we all remember Michael Barnett, the dramatic one, the guy that was falling on the floor, beating on the floor, and carrying on like a child and doing all of these things. And they have this big showdown, and Antoine's sticking up for Natalya, and he starts screaming at Michael. We know him from that, and we start to sort of trust him. Antoine's not the most trustworthy figure. You kind of look at him sideways. It's like, okay, man, I guess. I mean, if it's working out, it's working out. And then we get, the big ending finale in season 2 where they have successfully adopted Natalya. And, then they cut to this phone call. And that phone call was, I don't know what's going on with Natalya, but she's over here. She's tweaking. You know what? Let me see if I could find the audio real quick. Just, I can't do an Antoine impression. Antoine Mans phone call to producers. It's got to be up here somewhere. I don't know if I could find it quickly. Probably not. Now, well, they started it. There was a phone call, and you know what? If I go here, I bet you I'll find it. Folks, I'm going to take my time on this, and I'm going to make sure that I get it because I think that it would be worth it to do it. And so I'm going to do it. Anyway. This was the phone call that we were left with, and I'm only going to play the audio because I don't want to get copyright strikes or anything of that nature.
When did you think I'm in a
Could you hear that?
cult?
The moment the cat stuff started happening.
I want the world.
All right. So December 1st, 2023. This is the phone call that the producers received.
We got a situation.
Something ain't right with the tire. This girl is tweaking. He got this dude online. He turned her against us.
She was going to pack up and leave and go to the UK, the United Kingdom.
If she was there, he had held her hostage. And the devil's a whole liar because she's done other things too. But this was a new low.
There has been a lot of things that Natalya has done.
That's not the
adoption. He could have just left you in the parking when you was there.
Natalya stabbing her family in the back.
Emotions for nothing but herself. She's ready to go to hell with gasoline candies on. We're done. We're done with her.
She's ready to go to hell with gasoline panties on. I think I got to reserve that one. I'm going to use that somewhere. I got to work that in somewhere. So they start with this phone call. That phone call had always struck me as odd because it seems incredibly self-centered. Incredibly self-centered for parents that were presenting as the savior of Natalia Grace, who only had her best interest at heart. And they start this phone call with Natalia is tweaking. She only cares about herself. She's talking online. She's done these things. It's like, what happened? And so since we heard and caught wind of that phone call, we have been left to speculate what's actually gone on. And turns out that Natalia, being a 19 to 20-year-old girl, wouldn't you know it, she is interested in dating other people. And given the fact that she has access to the internet, she found and met some guy from the UK. They started up and had a relationship, and the mans didn't like it. But why would they react so dramatically like that and call the producer? It didn't strike me as odd that they were angry or upset or whatever their conundrum was. It struck me as odd that they would call the producers of the documentary that had just spent years with Natalia, telling her story to the entire world and presenting this whole thing and trying to end up with this happy ending. And they called the producers of the documentary to do what? To try to like blow it up? It's not that they were angry. It's just that they went to that level of, what were they trying to do? Expose her? Like, were they trying to ruin the entire, I don't know. And so for the last year, we've been wondering like where they were going with that. And that's where they went. And they start to unravel that. So here's what happens in episode 1. They start with that phone call. They reveal a family dynamic that has been maybe irreparably fractured. There were concerns about Natalia's well-being that were brought about by this new guy that she's been talking to in the UK. And since the documentary's ended, I think they're still talking. Like, he seems to be a genuine guy, according to the DePauls and others that have met him. They actually flew her to the UK to get to meet this young man. And they didn't reveal his identity or anything, but it seems to be like a genuine thing. Whatever. So we open with that phone call. There's conflicting accounts about what's going on. The producer and some of the people that worked on the documentary expressed concerns for Natalia's safety and well-being. They sort of reveal her UK boyfriend. Then they talk about how the Manses have cut off Natalia from the outside world. They took away internet access and social media. They were preventing her from communicating with others. And they appear to be holding her against her will. So the producers of the show get on a plane. They fly to the Manses to try to have a sit-down interview. And as soon as they touch ground, Antoine calls them back. Hey, never mind. That whole phone call, we've resolved the whole thing. There's an understanding. But they were already there. So it's like, all right, well, you guys might as well come over. And then they have this opening interview with the Manses and Natalia. And what we come to find out in that conversation, and the Manses are talking about it as if it's like the most normal thing, like it's just, like it's just another Tuesday. There was an exorcism performed on Natalia Grace. They straight up said that they believe she had a demon. They believe that demons can jump in and out of bodies, and they prayed the demon away. And whoever that was talking to that young man was not Natalia. And this whole attempt to show a unified front against the phone call that they had perpetrated earlier. I'm not even sure the exact time frame, but that phone call was December of 2023. Producers are there, presumably shortly thereafter. They resolved the whole thing. And then what is all that about? Now, later on in the season, around episodes 3 and 4, it is revealed that, well, they try to say that the internet history, the search history, the chat history, all of that they took it and they deleted it. Well, there are other conflicting accounts that say that, oh no, they didn't delete it. They still have it. And not only do they still have it, but there is a lot of dirt on the Manns. And Natalia spent 11 years with that family. And there are accounts of physical abuse and neglect by multiple people. There were multiple CPS reports. The one that now look, they didn't get the conclusions of all of the reports. There was one report that came back as unfounded. Whenever CPS investigates a case, there's one of three possible outcomes. Either the allegations prompting CPS to report on it are founded, meaning there's evidence saying that, oh yeah, definitely abuse occurred here. Or inconclusive, it's like, well, we can't really say one way or another. Maybe it happened. I don't know. Or unfounded. And unfounded is like, yeah, there's nothing to support here. There's no evidence or even reason to think that abuse or neglect has occurred here. The one CPS finding that was revealed on the documentary was unfounded. I just want to say that from the jump. But there was multiple, like 9, 10, 11, I forget the specific number, reports to CPS, not just for Natalia, but for other children that they were in care for. There was allegations of sexual abuse between Antoine and some of the female children that he was caring for. Physical abuse, obviously. There was altercations with neighbors. They exist in this bizarre bubble where they ingratiate themselves to families that are struggling financially, from what I can gather. Broken families where you have single moms that can't care for their children, that are on welfare and food stamps or whatever. They don't have the financial wherewithal to be a single parent. And so they say, you know what, we will be the guardians of your children. And then they become the guardians of the children and they adopt them. And the parents forfeit their parental rights as a result of that. And then they use those children to collect SSI benefits, government benefits, foster parent checks. And it could become quite lucrative. There are literally people that are not trying to abuse children that make a career out of being foster parents. The Manns, and by all accounts, Antoine never really held a job outside of him being a foster parent. When he first started coming around the church with Cynthia, he was just looked at this guy who was kind of rough around the edges, didn't have a job, cursed all the time, had a temper, was difficult to be around. And now all of a sudden we are to be led to believe that he is now Bishop Antoine Manns, capable of performing demonic exorcisms, whatever. But he's collecting all the money for that. And so, you know, it's a career. In the course of episode 1, we learn that they cut Natalia off from the outside world. Natalia expresses a desire to leave and move back to Indiana, where she had previously lived. She also expressed an interest in moving to the UK to see her boyfriend, who she had fallen in love with. Obviously, the Manns don't want that to happen because several things. What's in it for them? Natalia's an adult. All of those are valid points. The problem is, once she moves away, she's no longer collecting SSI, to which they are the payee, so they're no longer getting that money from her. And who knows the final tally of money that she collected from SSI that the Manns have stolen from her. It was revealed that it's at least north of $300,000. And we'll talk about more of that as we progress through my notes here. There was this plan that was concocted by the DePauls, and they fast forward, or they don't fast forward, they rewind back to a time when the DePauls, who are this family who have ailments that are similar to Natalia's. They're little people. They had some of the same spinal issues that she had, which they understand that if you don't get corrective surgery for these things, you could end up paralyzed. They had wanted to adopt her like way back when. I'm talking about like back in 2009. She spent some time in that house, like a month. She made friends with their youngest daughter. They have pictures and movies going back all the way back to like 2008, 2009 or something like that. So Natalia reaches out to them directly. And she's begging and pleading and saying, please come pick me. I cannot stay here another day. These people are controlling, they're abusing me. I feel like I'm trapped. I don't know what to do. And so they concoct this plan where they try to go and fly to where she's at. And then Natalia was going to announce that she's going to go to the restroom. And then she was really going to go outside, and then they were going to be waiting outside, and it was like this getaway car, and she was going to jump in the car, and they were going to take her back home and then live happily ever after. I don't know. You could imagine how that went. So they conclude season 1 in the middle of that attempt. In season 2, you'll find out that, well, hey, it worked. In the midst of all of that, while they are in the car making their getaway, Cynthia is calling over and over, asking Natalia to pick up the phone. And there's this confrontation that happens between Cynthia and Nicole DePaul, where it's, you guys can watch the documentary yourself, but it was a lot of yelling back and forth, and you're not doing this, you're not doing that, and Cynthia's carrying on about, I am her mother, I've been her mother for 11 years, and I hope that nothing like this ever happens to you. And there's a lot of the devil is a lie language that is going on back and forth. Inevitably, there is confrontations in that. It's unclear if it was multiple phone calls or in that same phone call, but there are confrontations about what's going on with Natalia's money. How come for 11 years you didn't get her this corrective surgery knowing that she could be paralyzed? She's not going to be paralyzed because we are good people of faith. And, well, I have the same condition. And I was going to end up paralyzed. And then, well, that's because you're a sinner. And like this very comical, ridiculous religious conversation ensues. All the while, Natalia's sitting there in the bedroom. I can't even imagine what she was going. I just want you to picture a reality, because this is, look, aside from the cartoonish nature of this documentary, because it is cartoonish. Imagine a world where you grew up, you were born in 2003. You lived in the Ukraine. You were given up by your biological mother. You spend the first 3 to 4 or 5 years of your life in a Ukrainian orphanage where you are abused, neglected, sexually assaulted, and then adopted by one family and it doesn't work out with them. You're adopted by another family where it looks like it might work out. That would have been the DePauls. But then the previous family writes a negative review and it doesn't go through. And then the Barnetts come in, they take her into their home. She lives with them for a number of years where she is severely physically and emotionally and possibly even sexually abused. There was allegations in season 2 that they were trying to pimp her out. I kid you not. I kid you not. Go back and watch season 2. Go back and watch my coverage of those prior episodes. But not Cynthia. Oh God, who was her? What was the name? Christine and Michael. Michael's Christine. Michael's wife, Christine, was having an affair with a little person. They featured him prominently in season 2 in multiple episodes. And one of the things that this little person said was that he thought that they were trying to pimp out Natalia. They were dressing her up like an adult, putting on makeup and clothes and all these kinds of things. And she was offered to him as like a sexual sacrifice, is the best way that I can describe it. He claims to have not been about it. He refused that advance from Christine. He refused Natalia as a sexual offering, but she was put on offer by the Barnetts. And I don't know if Michael was involved, but Christine would have been the perpetrator of all that. And by the way, she's had very little involvement, if any, with this documentary whatsoever. They basically have posed her as the devil. And look, supported by legal documents and pleadings and evidence and lots of things, but there's not much of a defense for Christine. She had once written a meandering Facebook post trying to defend her actions in the adoptive timeline from which Natalia lived with her. And it was, I read it before, I'm not going to read it again. It was a tough read and was infuriating to read. There was a lot of different things, but what it wasn't was absolving of the allegations against her. And so she's lived this life. She's abandoned in a apartment, left to fend for herself as an 8, 9-year-old child. I'm talking about cook her own meals. I'm talking about literally living the life of a single person. And the neighbors would be complaining about, hey, this little person keeps on knocking on our door, wanting to hang out with us, has no concept of boundaries because she was a child. Couldn't cook for herself, didn't know how to keep proper hygiene, was extremely lonely, would have an abnormal obsession with wanting to hang out with other children, as you'd imagine, because she was a child. But if you think that she's an adult, you would find that exceedingly odd. And it's look, I'll let you guys go back and watch. That would have been season 1. Go back and watch the interviews from the neighbors who observed her in that apartment complex. Rather than go to her aid, rather than try to help her out, rather than say, this lady is not 21 years old. Get out of here with that. Clearly, this is a child. And there were people, law enforcement, CPS workers, teachers, that were all hinting and stating, I don't know what's going on, but this is a child. And she's sitting here in a school for adults. What is going on? There were plenty of people that raised questions, but it's like this entire neighborhood got a severe case of groupthink and just decided to paint her as this annoying adult with perhaps mental health issues, along with physical ailments. Oh, and by the way, allegations that she was sexually abusing the children that were there in the neighborhood, along with some of the siblings that she had lived with prior, and different things. It was heartbreaking to watch, knowing what we know now and in the context. Because back then, when they were doing season 1, there was always this narrative, well, what if she is an adult? We don't actually know how old she is. There's got to be something to it. And back then, we were questioning whether or not the Barnetts were being truthful or not. Well, based on what we know now with all of the medical professionals that have come out and spoken, there's no effing way that she was born in 1988. Her birth date of 2003 has more or less been confirmed. Oh, and by the way, she is legal. Her legal birth date is now 2003. They fixed that through her immigration case, as was revealed in season 3 of the documentary. So fast forward to episode 2. So they rescued Natalia. They got her from that church. They bring her back home. They start immediately talking about financial issues with the Manses and financial concerns like, why are you making them the payee of your SSI checks? You're going to need that money. And they were complaining that Natalia kept on asking for food and clothes and all these things and Taco Bell and whatever. It's like, okay. And then they're remarking that Natalia was going to pay them back. It's like, how are you going to pay me back? You ain't got no money. You're giving it all to the Manses. And so they have that discussion. And there was a brief moment in time where it's like, there's no effing way that the DePauls are going to start trying to defraud Natalia out of money. That was a brief thought. I'll just cut to the chase. It doesn't look like they're doing anything like that. It does look like they had their best interest in mind, her best interest at heart. They immediately start accusing the Manses of stealing Natalia's money, and it goes the way that you think it would go. So they talked about the Manses' income from fostering children, that they might be bringing in north of $100,000 a year. It was also revealed that Natalia was receiving like $700, $800 a month in government benefits. She was signing those over directly to the Manses. She didn't even have a bank account. She didn't even have any form of valid government identification. So when they tried to cash app Natalia like $100, it went straight into the Manses' bank account, obviously infuriating people. So Cynthia's calling over and over. Nicole is getting multiple phone calls from Cynthia expressing concern over Natalia's safety. There was this big confrontation that we talked about. Cynthia's arguing that Natalia was begging for her to come get her. Nicole was questioning why Cynthia took Natalia's phone, why she cut off contact from the outside world, took away the internet, all this other stuff. And why she never changed Natalia's payee status. Why was she still collecting the checks? What's really going on there? it was really upsetting to Nicole when in the midst of all of that, Natalia starts stating that she was happy with the DePauls, but that the Manzes hadn't done anything wrong. They hadn't done anything wrong, and they were fine, and they were controlling and this and that, but they were her parents, and she still wanted them to be the payee. Nicole immediately feels betrayed, maybe lied to a little bit. I mean, I couldn't imagine what she was feeling, but it wasn't the same as "come get me, I'm in danger." It was, "Oh no, now she's here, and the Manzes weren't so bad. And by the way, she still wants them to collect all of her money." And so Nicole's like, "WTF? What are we doing right now? What's actually going on?" It's revealed that Natalia has no savings from previous media appearances. They talked about the Dr. Phil show. They talked about her GoFundMe that I had talked about back in last January. All of that money from all of those appearances went straight to the Manzes. Natalia starts claiming that the Manzes were fine, they are her family, when earlier they were financially exploiting her and all of this. It appears that Natalia's saying what others want to hear. There is this concern. Like, why is it that when the cameras are on, Natalia appears to be defending the Manzes? When you turn the cameras off, she starts talking about all of these abuse and neglect allegations. There was a moment in the show where Nicole confronts Natalia directly about, why are you defending the Manzes? And what about this? What about that? And then Natalia just straight up says, "Can we cut the cameras for a minute?" And then she just gives her like a look like. And according to Nicole DePaul, she said something. She was like, that's where she did that like a split personality thing where her face went blank. She was staring daggers at me and she just became a completely different person. There's been a number of allegations that Natalia does that. Like, she'll be one person in one way, and then in a split second, she'll turn into somebody else, and it'll be like this striking thing. We've never seen it on camera. But if that's what they're talking about, she just gives her, it was literally like, "Could we just cut the cameras?" Then she looks like Nicole, like, seriously? It's like, oh, so she gets angry. Okay. There's nothing remarkable about that. She gets angry. And it causes her face to change its look or whatever. But it's not like this legitimate split personality. Like, one moment she's like this 5-year-old little girl. Another moment she's like this evil, conscientious adult that's looking to do nefarious things. It was nothing like that. I was like, okay, so that's what they mean. So she's got a mean face. That's like every other woman I've ever had in my life. They all have that thing. Most women, I don't want to say just women, men and women, when they get upset, will have a change like that. And it'll be instantaneous. Nobody ever accuses them of having split personalities in like a serious way. But they've been doing that to Natalia all of her life. So they talk about how the Manzes are suspected to be somehow controlling Natalia from all the way across state lines. What do they have on Natalia where she's fearful of speaking out against them? And then they spend the remainder of episode 2 talking to other people's testimonies of the Manzes. There was a woman named Anna Newland who lived with the Manzes, claims that Cynthia and Antoine gave Natalia the best living situation and that their parenting was on point. However, Anna then contradicts her previous statements and claims that the Manzes were violent towards Natalia and that Antoine would hit her with a belt and knock her down the stairs. And then it was revealed, like, what is it with this whole thing where people that know these things about the Manzes, when they're pressed, flip, like, oh no, they're doing fine. And it was speculated there's got to be a reason why they're doing that. Is it because they're actively blackmailing her? I mean, they were literally in care of this lady, Anna Newland's children. They're being raised by the Manzes. And it was speculated on the show that the reason why she was saying one thing off camera and another thing on camera was because she didn't want anything bad to happen to her children, which is to suggest that Antoine and Cynthia Mans are the kinds of people that would blackmail you into silence, perhaps by threatening harm on your child, among other things. There was a gentleman named Matthew Newland, the husband of Anna. Check that. It was not her husband. It was her brother. He confirmed the abuse occurred in the Mans' home. He said that Natalia was very scared of Antoine and Cynthia. Keep in mind that Natalia had lived with the Manses for 11 years prior to making her big escape. This attorney that had been a part of the documentary since, I think, season 1, Beth Karras, goes on to opine that others believe that Natalia is brainwashed. Her behavior is contradictory, makes it difficult to understand her true feelings towards the Manses, and she goes on that whole diatribe. The episode continues to highlight the contradictory story of Natalia, what she says on camera versus off camera. They have various clips of her in the surveillance cameras of the DePauls saying bad things about the Manses. And then she gets on camera and says the thing. That was season 2, going into season 3. So they start off, they continue to talk about Natalia's inconsistent behavior. Publicly, she's expressing love for the Manses. Privately, she's saying terrible things. The contradictions making it difficult to know what's going on. The DePauls are struggling with the dichotomy of what do we get ourselves into? Now, they go into this whole love story about how Nicole met her husband like 22 years ago, and he was like this hot guy, and he was really shy, but, you know, they've known each other for all this time. He was against Natalia coming back to the house because we didn't know what we were getting ourselves into, was essentially his argument. And he was right. He was right. I just, you know, I keep, when I consider Natalia's situation, I just could never imagine what it would be like to go through this universe without ever truly having a home base. Like all of you, most of you guys that are listening to the show, and you guys have a mom and a dad or parents, or you have a home base. You got somewhere where you could go to for the holidays and you could call it home. Unequivocally. Like you're always safe there. Like you go back to your grandma's house for Christmas Eve, and look, no matter what's going on in the world, no matter what your ailments, no matter what is bothering you that day, you're safe. You're safe. And people love you, and they love you unconditionally. And you could just be and revert back to like 3 or 4 or 5 years old and just be with your family. Natalia has never, ever, ever had that. And the entire history of those that have been charged with caring for her has been this history of individuals who, for varying reasons, chose to attempt to abuse her to varying degrees, emotionally, sexually, financially, blackmail, extortion. You gotta be kidding me. So when it became revealed that that's what it appears has been going on in season 3, I mean, what do you even say? I mean, so there was the Barnetts. They had her for like 3-4 years. The Mans come and rescue her. Maybe now she's going to have a normal childhood, a normal life. And we come to find out that not only was the Manses also physically abusing and physically and mentally controlling Natalia and doing who knows what other unspeakable things for 11 years. But they were also extorting her, stealing her money, using it to pay for houses and trailers for themselves, and allowing her to accumulate tax debts that they straight up refused to pay. They confronted Cynthia about, so are you gonna help out Natalia with her tax debt? And then Cynthia said, I never said that. The devil is a lie. She says the devil is a lie, which I don't even know grammatically what that even means. The devil is a lie. It seems like an incongruous statement, for one. My notes. Anyway, we're at the beginning of season 3 at this point. There were doubts about the things that Natalia was saying. The DePauls were thinking that maybe they've brainwashed Natalia. Maybe this was like some kind of weird religious cult, and maybe they did this like weird exorcism, getting the demons out of Natalia, and now she's become like this different brainwashed person. They later conclude that that wasn't the case. There's something else going on. And what I suspect it is, this is just my opinion, and I deal, I've had such a fascination with this case because I work in these arenas. I deal with children that are in foster homes that have been adopted. They have adoptive parents that have people that are applying for guardianship with them, children that have no home base. And it's striking because sometimes the courts will be like, well, why don't we just talk to the kid and see what they have to say? It's just not as simple as that. You're asking to interview children that are being fed information from the people that may be harming them, whom they also live with, whom they therefore depend on to be alive, for room and shelter and sustenance and who knows what else. And so you're asking them to speak out negatively against the people that have cared for them historically, expecting them to have all of the maturity that an adult would, and understanding that we're getting them out of a bad situation, and surprised when there's allegations of abuse and neglect and the child does not speak out negatively against their parents. Wonder why. And then the judges, in all of their infinite wisdom, will be like, well, we brought her in to talk. She didn't say that any of those things were going on, so I'm not going to do anything about it. And then sometimes they'll even take the child's word over the expert opinions of various psychologists and therapists that say specifically, look, what we have here is a child that's been without a home base since 2003. She's never had a permanent home. Everybody that's ever attempted to care for her has abused her on various levels and left her to fend for herself or abandoned her completely. Abused her physically, emotionally, sexually, in any other kind of way you could possibly think of. And excuse her for being just a little bit confused over who's good and bad, over what's good and evil, over who is on her side and not. And forgive her for not having the ability to speak coherently as an adult to highlight the atrocities that have befallen her over the years. It's hard. I could not even imagine. So, and now you have this girl. She's been with the Manses. Now she's been rescued by the DePauls. And they are questioning her right away. I mean, putting on the full court press. You said this, this, and that, but now you're saying these things. What the F? And so it seems like it's following this same period of, oh, Natalia, she's so cute. Let's go save Natalia. Let's do all these things. Then they get her in the house like, wait a minute, who's this person? And they look at her skeptically. So it makes sense that every new person that she ever speaks to, she's going to look at skeptically and be closed off and not want to talk about things. We already know that she has a history of not wanting to talk about certain traumas. There were very specific and poignant questions asked to Natalia about what the Manses were doing to her in terms of physical abuse and otherwise, and she just didn't want to talk about it. Didn't want to talk about it on camera, refused. That's become her signal that, look, things have been going on, but I ain't talking about it with you. Not right now. Not on camera. And so I don't understand why people look at something like that and don't have ultimate empathy or grace for why she's saying those things. Now, at the end, I will say, at the end of season 3, episodes 3 and 4, they do get Natalia talking to a therapist, and they straight up tell her, it's like, look, you're dealing with somebody that has a lot of emotional baggage, and it's going to be a lot to work with her. You're talking about a young lady that has a first grade education, and she presents as a teenager, as a 21-year-old because she is severely emotionally undeveloped. She's been looking for parents for her entire life. She's never once considered that she has the ability to be out there on her own, to manage her own money, to buy her own things, to live her own life. Although she has those desires, it's the same way that a teenager would have those desires. Hey, man, I wanted to do a lot of things when I was a teenager. I wanted to buy a house, wanted to buy a car, but I was in high school. Come on, man. I wanted to date Kathy Ireland, too. But I was immature, and I needed some room to develop and grow, and I was a teenager. That's the way that Natalia presents. As a child, that just needs to work through some things. So, we talk about that. The DePauls tried to explain what they saw in videos. And what I mean by the videos is the accounts of neighbors talking out and speaking out against the Manzes and various instances of abuse that they witnessed and saw. And they try to talk to Natalia about it. She immediately shuts them down, denies everything. And then they think that the denial seems premeditated, as if she had already decided to reject any negative information whatsoever about the Manzes. It's very clear to me that there were trust issues and trauma issues that were inherent with Natalia and her ability to potentially connect with the DePauls. And a lot of that has been explained because she has been diagnosed with RAD, a health issue, an inability to connect with people because of fear of development, lack of socialization, potentially other mental health issues, a severe need for therapy to get through the 23 years of garbage that she's been forced to endure, conflicting behaviors, trauma, manipulation. It was highlighted that it's going to take an extraordinary amount of patience and understanding if there's going to be a successful connection and bridge of trust between the DePauls and Natalia. And so the DePauls are seen in this episode, in episode 3, struggling with that conflict. And they realize, to their extreme credit, they realize that it's going to take some time for her to trust. They recognize that she's experienced trauma. But they did have security cameras lined up all over the house in their home that would sometimes capture Natalia speaking truthfully about Cynthia and Antoine, which led credence to this idea that Natalia is afraid to say negative things against the Manzes. There's this blackmail theory, this wild story. Look, Natalia Grace is an adult young woman. She is, if she's born in 03, that would put her, like 22 years old? About to be 23, maybe? At least 22? She is a young lady with adult urges and adult curiosities. And there have been reports about her overly sexualized behavior from a very early age. Part of that, the result of the sexual atrocities that were befallen on her when she was growing up, when she was abused at the Ukrainian orphanage, when she was abused at the Barnetts, when she was potentially abused at the Manzes, and wherever else it happened. I mean, the young lady lived in her own apartment, and God knows what happened over there with various creepy, disgusting old men that would go and pay her visits, whom she would visit on her own. Who knows what happened with all of that? I don't even know. But obviously, she has an interest in things that are sexual, like every other red-blooded young lady. And so there was this theory that was espoused on episode 3, that the Manzes are blackmailing Natalia What are they blackmailing her with? Well, remember when we were talking about the UK boyfriend that she has? Well, obviously it's a long distance relationship, and they were texting back and forth and FaceTiming back and forth and messaging on the internet back and forth for extended periods of time. And logic just kind of strikes you as obviously probably in the course of getting to know each other, some of that probably turned sexual. There was probably nude images exchanged back and forth between the two of them because they were adults. And sometimes adults do that. And they went through Natalia's things, through her phone, through her computer, confiscated it, claimed to have deleted the evidence, but it's been opined that, oh, they didn't delete anything. They still have those things. And they've been using it to control. Basically saying that, look, you know some things about us? We know some things about you. You don't say, we won't say. And everybody won't have a say, if that even makes sense. And she was fearful of that. Why? Because she's a young girl that hasn't had images. Imagine somebody, there's hundreds, there's thousands of stories out there about people trying to scam or black people out of money by threat of releasing nude images to their friends and family in the world. Natalia Grace has lived her entire life basically as a public figure. She's famous because of this story. And so it's not just her friends and family that would have got the images. It would be the internet is an unkind place. And it has been exceptionally disgusting and mean to Natalia. Imagine if somebody were to get a hold of nude images of her, how they would attempt to destroy and put stuff out there against her. That's a lot to consider. For anybody, let alone an underdeveloped 22-year-old girl that doesn't want that stuff out there. And so maybe that threat is just enough to buy her silence. And so that was a theory that was advanced. The Manses are still holding on to large sums of Natalia's money. It was revealed, estimated to be over $200,000 at least, because they bought some things. Natalia, we talked about her still allowing Cynthia to be her payee. They used her money to buy a trailer. Natalia was hesitant, reluctant, not wanting to challenge them on this. And then they had this talk, which just made me super hardcore cringe. They were talking about, Natalia just straight up asked Cynthia, like, hey, so am I going to get any of that money back? They got her on a 3-way call with Antoine and Cynthia. And the following conversation ensues where it's like Antoine says, the wise bishop, Antoine Mans, says, well, what amount of money do you think would be fair? It's like asking a defendant to sentence themselves at a sentencing hearing. It's a psychological trick because it puts the onus of fairness on the person asked the question. And when the person asked the question has been violated and abused and neglected and controlled by the person asking the question, it's really hard because they are not thinking of themselves in that moment. They are thinking of the entire construct of what they have built and playing on her emotions and their position as essentially her parents for the last 11 years. And so what would be a fair amount that we should give you back? Never mind, they're sitting on north of $200,000. What Natalia proceeds to say was, I don't know, $25,000. Antoine's like, done. Sign it. Draw up the papers right now. I'll sign that right now. She wasn't represented by counsel. She wasn't represented by even the DePauls at that point. She was talking to her abusers by herself. And not only did she agree to that verbally in a recorded phone conversation that was broadcast on this documentary, but they put it in writing. And they said, look, we just want it to be known that we've had this conversation about what would be fair of the finances. She said $25,000 and we gave her $25,000 and ran off with like the bulk of it. It made me sick to my stomach. Now, look, there's ways that you can challenge that. Sure. Could she just try to invalidate the contract and say that, well, I was under duress, undue influence, duress. I wasn't in my right mind. I didn't have the proper capacity when I was dealing with my abusers to deal fairly in the moment. She can make those arguments, and she can maybe even make those arguments successfully in a court of law. What is it going to cost to get there, though? And how long is that going to take? Because that's a trial. That's at least 18 months of litigation, probably north of $100,000 in attorney fees and costs, conservatively estimating that. Yeah, she could do that and go to trial and win, but it's gonna be extremely difficult to do. And so when that happened and they allowed it to happen, I was, it just made me sick. It made me sick, but they did this. They did that. So they have that whole conversation. Nicole tried to talk directly with Cynthia and Antoine, and that just went about as well as you think it would. They were screaming over each other. She was trying to give them information that could help Natalia about, her back surgeries and all. And they weren't listening to that. They were calling her a sinner. They were saying devil is a lie a lot. They were calling her a devil. They were saying that her finances were none of their business, or their finances were none of her business. It went poorly. And it was at that point that I think that there was a point where the DePauls, where her husband, Cynthia's husband, was like, you know what, this is a bit much. I can't handle it. I can't handle it. He had threatened to leave. And then, he didn't leave, thankfully, but it was causing a lot of strife in that household. And, well, continue on. There appeared to be a pact between Natalia and Neil, which Nicole saw as a betrayal. Nicole felt that Natalia was siding with the Manzas, was possibly recording conversations in her house, and there was a question as to why. One of the hypotheses were that maybe they were just making sure that she wasn't talking negatively about the Manzas and showing the evidence to them. I don't know, but it was strange. They talked about that. Natalia decided that she was going to leave and go back home with the Manzas. They talked about, they described it as the hell loop, where Natalia was creating chaos in yet another household. It was noted that this pattern was similar to what happened with the Ciconis. That was her first adoptive family, the Barnetts, and they get Michael back on camera. Because of Natalia, I lost all my children, I lost my wife, I lost my home, all of these things. The DePauls wonder if they were going to be able to break this pattern, or if Natalia was eventually going to leave and go to another family. Neil was angry at Natalia for wanting to go back to the Manzas. It was clear that he was concerned about her safety, and then they talk about other stuff. So there's this whole conundrum. Like, it starts off with the best of intentions, and then we always end up back in this place where what's really going on with Natalia? What's actually wrong with her? And it causes all of this drama and strife in whatever family. So episode 4 opens up with this growing tension within the DePaul family, the result of Natalia's presence. Vince, Nicole's husband, expressed his frustration, noting that it was going to require a lot of attention, create a difficult dynamic. He states that he was against Natalia moving in from the very beginning. From Nicole's perspective, she felt guilty because she wasn't able to help with the adoption in the past, and she wanted to help her now, but she's conflicted because it was causing issues with their marriage. They get deeper into the financial exploitation that was going on They talked about how Natalia didn't have an ID. She couldn't open her own bank account. Vince is forced to become her payee, despite the fact that Natalia is 20 years old. They also discovered that Natalia doesn't have any money that she earned from her media appearance. They rehash that whole thing. And then they talk about the tax issues, and this part was wild. And look, up until this point, you could craft an argument that, you know what, maybe the Manzas were just misunderstood. Maybe they really are trying to do good, and it's just not going well. And maybe Natalia was just acting out because she didn't want to be controlled, or she didn't want to be raised or under their rules, and she was behaving as a teenage girl would. Maybe it's not all they're making it out to be. Maybe they're fine. But then they start talking about tax issues. So Natalia was unaware that she had a tax bill. That when she signed a W-9 form, which meant that all of those SSI checks that she was receiving, well, she was going to get taxed on them. She was going to get a bill. The DePauls realized that Natalia, it appeared to them, was being duped by the Manzas. She's allowing the Manzas to keep all of her money, and she has no money to pay this tax bill that was forthcoming. So there's this whole discussion that ensues. Natalia tries to hold the Manzas accountable at Nicole's behest. And she tells the DePauls that she wants her parents to help her pay the taxes. She appears to be grasping now that the Manzas are exploiting her. They have this whole conversation that ensues. And it starts with Cynthia speaking directly with Nicole first. And they have this communication where it's, so what about this tax bill? We understand that you're going to help Natalia pay her taxes. And Cynthia says immediately, oh, I never told her that. The devil is a lie. Again with that. And then they get into the shouting match, and then Cynthia ends up hanging up on her. And ultimately, it's revealed that Natalia has this conversation with Cynthia. And it's revealed through Natalia that not only are they not going to be paying for her tax bill, but they're basically cutting her off. No communication whatsoever. It's done. They're done with her. They're done with her. They wish her well in life. Bye-bye. See ya. They're not going to be helping her with her taxes. And they have Natalia now sitting there devastated, like, holy shit, this entire time they were exploiting me? This entire time they were taking my money? They're really going to do this to me? This is really what it's turned out to be? And she's going through the reality of that situation. It was really heartbreaking to see her like that. They did hire her an attorney to try to protect Natalia from the legal issues that were going to ensue, help her with her finances. And then they end episode 4 with that whole revelation. And I'll wrap up this whole recount briefly and just share my thoughts. They hired her an attorney. They take a vacation to the UK. They go meet her boyfriend. They go do all of these things. She cuts her hair for the first time. She starts dressing as an adult, and it was revealed that she was never allowed to wear makeup before, because when women wear makeup, it's to seduce men, and they do it for sexual reasons. And I don't want to be a sinner, and all this other stuff that was placed in her head when she was living with the Manzas. Now she's kind of breaking out, and she's becoming a young lady. And they take this vacation to the UK. She's excited that she's traveling to England for the first time. They start revisiting some stuff about her past. They revealed that she was re-aged through the immigration process. Her literal birth date is now 2003. There's no longer any questions about it. The DePauls ultimately are presented as a stable, loving home. And they try to recreate the happy ending that was supposed to be Inheritance season 2. Well, now we're doing it, but we're doing it with the DePauls. So she's doing fine. And so that's where they are. She had this photo shoot in New York with People magazine, and she's on the cover of People magazine and all of this stuff. And so there is that. And so what are we to make of all of those things? And what are we to take away from it? And look, Again, this is a case that was special to me insofar as I've been following it since about 2011 when I was in law school. It was strange when my daughter was when Olivia was like 3-4 years old. She had there was this picture of Natalia where she looks exactly like my daughter, and then it just kind of just messed with my mind. It's like, oh, I don't know if it gave me like this abnormal or extra motivation to follow this story or care about this case, but it definitely just clued me in. So this is a little girl. You guys are calling her an adult. But if you guys are wrong, and all the evidence pointed to them being wrong, them being the Barnetts, then what you've really actually done is left an 8-year-old girl to fend for herself in an apartment. Let's just go over her history of abuse. Born in the Ukraine, has a form of dwarfism called, I can't even pronounce it, spondylophyseal dysplasia. Her mom, Anna Gava, stated that Natalia's birth was difficult. She was advised to give Natalia up for adoption, claimed that she didn't have a choice in the matter. It was alleged that Natalia was sexually at this orphanage in the Ukraine. She's passed between several families before being adopted by Michael and Christine Barnett, who had this vision that they were going to go on Oprah, and Christine was writing a book, and she was going to paint herself as this miracle worker, adoptive parent that was saving Natalia from herself. They had taken all of Natalia's money from that. They wrote books about her. Natalia never receives any of that money. The Barnetts adopted her in 2010. And following the documentary and all of the stories, they initially thought that they were adopting a 6-year-old girl. Well, she would have been 6 years old at the time. Then they start to suspect, hey, she's older, has a history of violence with other kids. They claim that Natalia was a menace, threatened to kill their entire family. Those episodes were wild. The Barnetts. It's hard to even revisit it. They accused Natalia of trying to poison Christine at one point. They accused her of standing over their bed with a knife. They stated that Natalia tried to stab them in their sleep. They claimed that Natalia tried to push Christine onto an electric fence. A 3-foot-tall little person who weighed about 45 pounds was going to push this 150-pound lady into an electric fence in an instance of attempted murder. That's what they claimed. They legally petitioned to have her re-aged. A judge rules that she was 22 years old in 2012. In 2012, she would have been about 8 years old. It was done without Natalia's knowledge. She wasn't even represented legally in those proceedings. They went forward on it anyway. The Barnetts moved to Canada in 2013 and left her alone in an apartment in Indiana. The neighbors described Natalia as having a so what attitude about her alleged attempts to harm the Barnetts. They noted she didn't seem to care about her disturbing behavior. They accused her of trying to burgle things and steal things and do, she was even accused of trying to sexually like a 5-year-old boy who she was like playing in a playground with. The Barnetts were accused of neglecting her, abandoning her, not providing her proper care. They were charged with neglect. The charges were dropped. Christine was accused of beating Natalia. She was accused of trying to erase Natalia from the family. They tried to make her look older. They tried to pimp her out. They tried to do all these things. She was forced, not just in Indiana, to fend for herself. Neighbors reported that she was struggling to take care of herself. She was wearing dirty clothes, smelling of body odor, unable to keep up, unable to have keep up her hygiene because she was 8, living by herself, and physically disabled. It's not like she could just walk around. She was, using a walker most of the time. She walks with a severe limp. And then the Manses come along, and it's supposed to be this story of, it's a happy ending. And then we come to find out 11 years later that they were doing some of the exact same stuff and exploiting her for financial gain. I'd like to believe that we can close this chapter on Natalia and just be safe and comforted in the fact that she is with a family that cares about her, that she's going to get the help that she needs, that nobody's going to try to harm her anymore, that, you know, all of these things. But I'm just not so confident, man. She is a young lady that has lived in the public spotlight unknowingly for her entire life. Her entire identity is wrapped up in this Natalia Grace persona, where she was the re-aged orphan from Ukraine. Her identity is the victim, as being the victim of abuse. She has been poked and prodded and interviewed and examined endlessly by law enforcement and varying government agencies for her entire life. I'm talking about straight down to the DNA, where they got her DNA analyzed and found that, yeah, all of her age benchmarks suggest that she was born in 2003. She only recently, as of like 2000 or 2022, was able to come to grips with, yeah, I'm actually only 20 years old. I'm not this 32-year-old that everybody thinks that I am. And she's only been able to come to that realization recently in, you know, the last couple of years or so. She is a young lady without a home base. Even with the DePaul's best efforts, I'm not certain that they're ever going to be able to connect with her on a level that lends itself to Natalia being able to say that she has a home base with them. And what do I mean by home base? Just somewhere you could go where it's home. Like somewhere you go for Christmas Eve, for Christmas Day, for the holidays. The place where you can go when everything else around you is crumbling, when the walls of Jericho are falling. And, you know, the bill collectors and the tax man and whoever is after you when your ex cheated on you, or, well, they became an ex because they cheated on you, and whatever, child support and issues, and your boss is a dick. The one place where you don't have to be anything, where you could just be the daughter. She's never really had that. And the places where she thought she was getting it, it was always with the caveat, you know, the Manses were doing it, but they were taking her money and they were going to financially ruin her. They were doing it, but they had some skeletons in their closet and they didn't want it getting out. So they were going to blackmail her with perhaps releasing sexting messages between Natalia and her boyfriend in the UK, which is the lowest form. Could you even imagine taking that angle against a child of yours? I mean, you know, I've always looked at Antoine sideways just because he presents as so overtly religious. I'm usually skeptical of those people to begin with. Coming to find out, he's a bishop because he called himself a bishop. Well, then call me Bishop Omar. I'm Bishop Omar, and you will address me as bishop. It's like, no, you will address me as bishop. It's like hell, I will. My bishop is stronger than yours. And then just, what are we doing? You can just make up a church and create your own church, make your own titles and present yourself as this religious sage. And then you're saying stuff like, the devil is a lie. It's performing exorcisms. You know, the Catholic religion, I'm not Catholic or anything, but they have an extensive protocol where you have to actually be qualified to even do such a thing. It was part of the 70s and 80s religious fascination with exorcism that it became like this whole demonic possession became like this whole gripping thing where there were now self-proclaimed exorcists because of the movie. And then in the 80s, there was all these televangelists. There was even a guy, I think his name was Bob Larson, who would go around and like proclaim himself like the real deal exorcist and have like these shows where he would cast out demons. And it was this thing. Antoine always struck me as a guy like that. He's got a YouTube channel out there somewhere. He's got people that subscribe to him. He talks about you got to be financially blessed before any other blessings. And he's been financially blessed, even if it's through fraud, even if it's through abusing and controlling and blackmailing the people that he's caring for and their parents and stripping them of parental rights. It is the lowest form of human being to exploit for financial gain young children, which it appears that's what the Manns have been doing. I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, I know what to make of them now. Just knowing that Natalia's her entire life history, she doesn't know anything other than abuse and people trying to exploit and take advantage of her. Even this documentary, the way that it was produced and the way that it was so dramatically put together, it makes me question everybody that's involved. The producers, I mean, obviously they're in it for financial gain. What other reason would they have to do this? What, to raise the social discourse on issues related to Natalia Grace? Give me a break. They're making millions of dollars on this documentary. They got people to pay. They got bills to pay. The DePauls, how much do they get paid for this? They put their family through this. I can't imagine that was free. How much money are they getting for this? And how much of that money is Natalia going to actually collect? Does she even have the ability to hold her own money? Does she have a bank account now? I don't remember in the documentary. They never really addressed that. They got her an attorney or whatever. So I got to assume that maybe she does. But if your entire life experience is that, people constantly trying to take chunks out of you, I could not imagine what your outlook on the universe would be. It's just such a complex maze. And then if her conclusion later in life becomes, like in her 30s, her 40s, she just realized, you know what? F the DePauls, F the Manses, F the Barnetts. She starts her family. Is she ever going to be able to connect with a husband who's not trying to exploit her, that's just trying to make her his wife? Raise children with her, build a house, build a family. Is she ever going to be able to trust anybody ever? Is she ever going to find that level of connection with somebody where she can be safe just being broken and imperfect? Her entire life, she's been broken and imperfect and victimized. Her entire life. She's never, ever experienced coming from a position of strength, ever in her life. So my hope for her is that, look, it's going to probably take extensive years of therapy. I just don't want her to quit on the therapy. It might be a lifelong endeavor, to be honest with you. It might be. I wish her nothing but peace. I wish her nothing but success. But most importantly, I wish her to connect with somebody and really build a home base. I worry about this little girl. I still call her a little girl, even though she's a grown adult now, 22 years old. I just want her to find something where she can finally rest her head. I don't think she's ever had. I mean, there was accounts of Antoine literally beating her with the belt. This guy walks into he says that, I know the church like the back of my hand. I hear these screams coming from the basement of this building. He walks into the basement, takes off his shoes so nobody's going to hear him coming down the stairs. And he observes Antoine standing over this little 3-foot person, beating her incessantly with a belt as she's shaking in fear, tears streaming down her face for who knows how long. That's the image that we've always known and seen of Natalia as this victimized person. I'm hoping in the coming years, as we continue to follow her story, that she finds some respite from all of that. And as to the Manns, they've been exposed as frauds. And I've seen people like them, not just the religious extremism, the fake religious, whatever it is that they're doing, and whatever religious jargon that they use. There's a lot of real, genuine religious folks out there. They are not one of them. I wish them whatever is coming for them. That's what I would say. If they are religious folks, if they believe in retribution and tales of building up a moral and spiritual deficit that they're one day going to have to be accounted for. I hope that they got to pay their bill. That's all I'm going to say about that. All right, folks, we're going to start Flad in about 15 minutes. So, Dom, if you could filter everybody over there. And I hope to see you guys there, or if not as many as possible. Bruce will be on there, confirmed. I also have Melissa and Jocelyn in studio. Dom is, of course, here. Maybe we'll be joined by a couple of other friends. The Schnitzel might be making a guest appearance for about an hour or so. But I love you all. If I don't see you guys over in Flat, I hope you have a wonderful weekend out there. Stay safe. If you're in California, try to stay out of LA, if at all possible. And we will see you guys next week, if not in Flat, in about 15 minutes. We love you all. Bye-bye.